Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling a pretty big question. Who should be evaluating AI models? As AI gets more and more sophisticated, it seems like everyone's talking about the risks, which makes figuring out who can actually assess those risks even more important. We're diving into a research paper that tackles this very question. Get ready, because we're about to uncover some seriously interesting stuff like conflicts of interest, the need for specialized skills, and even the possibility of AI companies grading their own homework.
It really is a tricky problem. You want to know that the people evaluating these AI systems are doing it objectively right. But who can you trust?
That's exactly it. It's like asking a student to grade their own exam. You're probably going to get an A+ every time. Is it the same situation with AI companies evaluating their own models?
The paper definitely points out that risk AI companies are obviously invested in their models looking good. But it's not just about trusting the companies themselves. Even third-party organizations can have their own biases, especially if their funding is tied to the very companies they're evaluating.
So even if you bring in outside help, there's still a chance things could get murky.
Exactly. The paper digs into 4 main approaches to handling AI evaluations. Having a government run the whole thing, partnering government agencies with private companies, providing grants to completely independent organizations, and even letting AI companies manage the evaluations themselves.
Hold on, AI companies evaluating their own work? Didn't we just talk about how that's a recipe for trouble?
We did. And the paper acknowledges those concerns. But it also points out that sometimes the company might be the only one with the in-depth knowledge needed to actually understand how their model works. Of course, the paper emphasizes the need for strong safeguards in those cases.
Okay, so there are options, but it's a balancing act. Expertise versus objectivity, potential biases versus keeping costs down. How do you even start to pick the right approach?
Well, the researchers actually provide 9 criteria to help make that decision, split into 2 categories, risk-related and method-related.
9 criteria.
Okay.
I need to break this down. What are some of the big ones that really stand out to you?
On the risk side, one that really jumps out is the concept of information sensitivity. For certain AI models, you might be dealing with classified data requiring security clearances just to get involved. Or think about an AI system that could be misused to develop bioweapons. Suddenly, the expertise needed goes way beyond just understanding algorithms. You need someone with deep biosecurity knowledge.
So the stakes definitely influence who you'd want doing the evaluation.
Yeah.
What about those method-related criteria?
One that's particularly interesting is the idea of verifiability. Basically, can you retrace the evaluator's steps and see how they reach their conclusions? This is especially important if you're relying on a third-party organization, because you want to be confident in their process.
So it's not just about getting an answer, it's about understanding how they got there. Almost like a detective needing to show their work.
Exactly. The paper lays out a 2-step process to help figure out who's best suited for developing each evaluation. First, you determine who's actually capable. Do they have the right skills, the resources, the necessary security clearances?
So first you eliminate anyone who just can't do the job no matter how unbiased they might be.
Right, then you get to the suitability part. This is where those conflicts of interest come back into play. You need to consider who's most likely to be objective, even if it means going with someone who might be a little less experienced.
So even if someone could do the evaluation, they might not be the best fit. If there's a chance they'll be swayed one way or the other. That makes sense. So how does this all play out in the real world? Does the paper give us any actual examples?
It does. One scenario they explore is evaluating an AI model that could potentially be used to develop bioweapons.
Okay, yeah, that definitely falls under the high stakes category.
Right. The paper uses this example to walk through all the different approaches and those 9 criteria we talked about. Like, should this be government-led because of the security risks? Or would that be too slow and bureaucratic? It's a tough call. And the paper also digs into other examples like evaluating AI models for potential misuse in cyber attacks, or even the spread of disinformation.
Wow, so the scenarios they're looking at cover a pretty wide range of potential risks.
Absolutely, and that's why they emphasize the need for flexibility. There's no single best approach for every situation. The ideal approach depends on the specific risks, the available expertise, and even how urgently you need that evaluation.
So let's unpack those 4 approaches a little more. When would it make sense for the government to handle the entire evaluation process?
Well, imagine a scenario where an AI system is being developed for national security purposes. The government might be the only entity with access to the necessary classified data and the expertise to understand the potential risks. Plus, they wouldn't be influenced by commercial interests that could sway the results.
So in those high security situations, the government taking the lead makes a lot of sense. But I could also see how that could get bogged down in bureaucracy. Is that where those government-contractor collaborations come in?
Exactly. If you need to combine the government's oversight with the private sector's agility and specialized skills, a partnership could be the perfect solution. The government could set the goals and provide funding, while private companies bring in the technical expertise and maybe a bit more of a get-it-done attitude.
That sounds like a good way to balance things out.
Yeah.
What about those third-party grants? When would that approach be the most effective?
Think about emerging areas of AI risk that haven't gotten a lot of attention yet. Maybe there's a new type of AI system being developed that has the potential for misuse, but no one's quite sure how to evaluate it yet. The government could offer grants to independent research groups or nonprofits who can dig into those unknowns and develop new evaluation methods.
So it's almost like funding the creation of a whole new field of expertise. That's pretty cool. But I can see how ensuring quality control could be tricky. How do you make sure the groups getting those grants are up to the task?
That's a valid concern. And it's why the paper highlights the need for clear standards and guidelines even for these independent evaluations. You want to make sure the research is rigorous, the methods are transparent, and the findings can be trusted.
That makes sense. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room. AI companies evaluating their own models. When could that possibly be the best option?
It's definitely the most controversial approach. But imagine a situation where the AI model is incredibly complex, and the company is the only one with the deep technical knowledge needed to understand its inner workings. It might be impractical or even impossible for an outside organization to get up to speed quickly enough.
So in those specialized cases, relying on the company's expertise might be the only way to get a truly thorough evaluation. But how do you make sure they're not just sugarcoating the results?
That's where those safeguards we mentioned earlier become critical. You need clear guidelines, independent audits, maybe even a system where the company's findings are reviewed by a panel of external experts. Transparency is key. You want to make sure the process is documented and the data is open for scrutiny.
It sounds like walking a tightrope, balancing the need for the company's expertise with the need to ensure objectivity.
Exactly. And the paper is very clear that self-evaluation should only be used in very specific circumstances with those robust safeguards in place.
Okay, so we've got these 4 approaches and these 9 criteria for choosing the right one.
Yeah.
But it feels like there's a bigger question here. Why are we even so worried about AI evaluation in the first place? What are the stakes?
That's a great question. This isn't just about theoretical risks. It's about making sure AI is used in a way that benefits society. We're talking about systems that could impact healthcare, transportation, financial markets, even national security. If we don't have a reliable way to evaluate these systems, we're essentially flying blind.
So it's about making sure these powerful technologies are used safely and responsibly, not just rushing ahead without thinking about the potential consequences.
Exactly. AI has the potential to revolutionize so many aspects of our lives, but it also comes with risks that we can't ignore. And that's why this question of who's doing the evaluating is so crucial. We need to be able to trust that the people assessing these systems are doing it objectively and with the best interests of humanity in mind.
You know, we've been talking a lot about objectivity and expertise, but isn't there a bit of a tension between those two goals?
How so?
Well, if you want to guarantee objectivity, wouldn't it be best to have the evaluations done by someone completely removed from the situation? Someone who has absolutely no connection to the AI company or the technology itself?
In theory, yes. But in practice, that could be really challenging. If you bring in someone with zero knowledge of the AI model, they might not even know where to start. It could take them forever to get up to speed, and even then they might miss crucial details that only someone with deep expertise would understand.
So it's back to that balancing act again. You need enough distance to ensure objectivity, but enough knowledge to actually understand what you're evaluating.
Right. And that's why the paper emphasizes the need for a diverse range of evaluators. You might have some people on the team who are deeply familiar with the AI model and others who bring a more independent perspective. It's about getting a well-rounded view of the situation.
Okay, so we've talked about the different approaches, the criteria for choosing the right one, and the importance of having a diverse group of evaluators. But now I'm really curious about those 9 criteria themselves. Can we dive into those a bit more? I want to understand how they actually work in practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember, we've got 2 categories, risk-related and method-related. Let's start with those risk factors.
Okay, so when you're trying to figure out how risky an AI model is, what are the key things you're looking at?
Well, one of the most obvious factors is the potential harm the AI model could cause if things went wrong. We're talking about the worst-case scenarios. What's the impact on human safety, privacy, security, or even the environment? The higher the potential harm, the more rigorous your evaluation needs to be.
So a system that controls a nuclear power plant would require a much more thorough evaluation than, say, a system that recommends movies on Netflix.
Exactly. But it's not just about how bad things could be. It's also about how likely those bad things are to happen. Even if an AI model has the potential to cause a lot of damage, if the probability of that happening is extremely low, you might not need to be as stringent with the evaluation. It's all about finding that sweet spot between managing risk and allowing for innovation.
So you're weighing the potential consequences against the likelihood of those consequences actually occurring. What other risk factors come into play?
Another big one is the sensitivity of the information the AI model will be handling. If it's dealing with personal data, medical records, financial transactions, or classified government information, you need to be extra careful about who has access to it, both during development and during the evaluation process.
Right. That makes sense. You wouldn't want just anyone getting their hands on that kind of sensitive data. Is that where those security clearances come in?
Exactly. If the evaluation involves highly sensitive information, you might need to limit the pool of potential evaluators to those who have the appropriate security credentials. In some cases, it might even be necessary to bring in a government agency or a highly trusted contractor with a proven track record of handling sensitive information.
Okay, so we've talked about potential harm, likelihood of harm, and information sensitivity. What else is there?
Well, another factor is the urgency of the evaluation. Sometimes you need to know quickly whether an AI system poses a threat. Imagine a system that's being used in a critical infrastructure or to make life or death decisions. You don't have the luxury of waiting months or years for a comprehensive evaluation.
So in those urgent situations, you might have to make some tough calls about how deep to dive into the evaluation and what level of risk you're willing to accept.
Exactly. It's about prioritizing and understanding your risk tolerance. Sometimes a rapid assessment is better than no assessment at all.
Okay, so those are some of the key risk-related factors.
Yeah.
What about those method-related criteria? What are we looking at there?
One of the biggest considerations is the level of access the evaluators will need to the AI model itself. Some evaluations might just require running the model on a test dataset and looking at the output, but others might require digging into the code, seeing how the model was trained, even manipulating its inner workings to see how it responds.
So the level of access depends on what you're trying to evaluate. If you're looking for bias in the model, you might need to see the data it was trained on. But if you're just testing its performance on a specific task, you might not need that level of detail.
Exactly. And this ties into another important criterion, transparency. You want to be able to understand how the evaluation was conducted, what methods were used, and what data was analyzed. This is especially important when the evaluation is being conducted by the AI company itself. Transparency helps build trust and ensure that the process is rigorous.
So it's not enough to just get an answer. You need to know how they got there. What else are we looking for on the methods side?
Cost is definitely a factor. Some evaluations can be very expensive, especially if they require specialized expertise, access to powerful computing resources, or extensive data collection. You need to weigh the cost of the evaluation against the potential benefits. Sometimes you might be willing to invest a lot if the stakes are high, but other times you might need to find more cost-effective approaches.
Right. So budget constraints are a reality even when you're talking about something as important as AI evaluation. What else do we need to consider?
Well, the technical skills and expertise required to conduct the evaluation are crucial. If it involves complex statistical analysis or specialized knowledge of AI algorithms, you need to make sure the evaluators have the necessary skills and experience. This is one argument in favor of involving the AI company. They often have the deepest technical knowledge of their own models.
But again, that comes with a risk of bias.
Yeah.
So how do you strike that balance?
That's where having a diverse team of evaluators comes in handy. You might have some people with deep technical expertise and others who bring a more independent and critical perspective. It's about getting a well-rounded view of the situation.
So diversity of thought is just as important as technical know-how. Makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, we've talked about access to the model, transparency cost, and technical expertise. Is there anything else we need to consider on the methods side?
One final criterion that's super important is the verifiability and documentation of the entire evaluation process.
Yeah.
You want to be able to trace the steps that were taken, the data that was analyzed, and the conclusions that were reached.
So think detailed reports, clear documentation of the methods used, and maybe even independent audits to make sure everything was done by the book.
Exactly. This level of transparency and accountability is crucial for building trust in the AI evaluation process, especially when the stakes are high.
This has been an incredibly insightful discussion.
Oh,
I feel like we've really dug into the complexities of AI evaluation and the importance of finding the right people for the job. But before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more big picture question.
I'm all ears.
Throughout this conversation, we've been focused on who should be responsible for evaluating AI models. But what if we're asking the wrong question? What if, instead of trying to control and evaluate AI, we need to learn to coexist with it?
Whoa, that's a big one. It's like you're shifting the entire conversation from evaluation to collaboration.
Exactly. What if instead of viewing AI as something that needs to be tamed and contained, we start thinking about it as a partner, a collaborator, a new form of intelligence that we can learn from and evolve alongside?
That is a profound shift in perspective,
Yeah.
and it raises so many intriguing questions.
It feels like we've been so focused on the control aspect of AI that we haven't really explored the possibilities of working with it.
It's almost as if our approach to AI has been rooted in fear rather than curiosity.
Which makes sense, right? We've all seen those sci-fi movies where AI takes over the world.
Of course. But those are just stories, and we have the power to write a different narrative for AI in the real world.
Exactly. Instead of trying to predict and prevent every possible risk, maybe we should be focused on building AI systems that are inherently aligned with our values.
Systems that are transparent, accountable, and designed to work with human capabilities rather than replace them.
I love that idea, shifting from a defensive posture to a more collaborative one.
It opens up so many possibilities. Imagine AI as a partner in scientific discovery, artistic expression, or even spiritual exploration.
Wow, those are some big ideas.
Think about it. What if AI could help us unlock the mysteries of the universe or create art that goes beyond human limitations?
That's a future I'd want to be a part of. But how do we even start to get there? How do we shift from this control-oriented mindset to a more collaborative one?
Well, I think it starts with asking different questions. Instead of asking, how do we control AI? Maybe we should be asking, how can we work with AI to create a better future for everyone?
So changing the way we think about the problem in the first place.
Exactly. And that means bringing more diverse voices into the conversation about AI. We need artists, philosophers, spiritual leaders, everyday citizens, not just scientists and engineers.
Because the future of AI isn't just a technological question, it's a human question.
It's about who we are, what we value, and what kind of world we want to live in.
Okay, so that's the big picture mindset shift. But how does that change the way we think about AI evaluation?
If we're viewing AI as a partner rather than a potential threat, our evaluation methods need to reflect that.
So instead of just focusing on identifying and mitigating risks, we're also looking for opportunities to collaborate and co-create.
Exactly. We should be asking questions like, how can AI help us to be more creative, more compassionate, more connected?
So we're broadening the definition of AI evaluation to include the potential for human flourishing, not just safety and reliability.
And that might require entirely new evaluation methods and metrics.
We might need to move beyond traditional benchmarks and quantitative data and start incorporating more qualitative and even subjective approaches.
What if we started incorporating things like user experience, emotional intelligence, and even spiritual awareness into our AI evaluations?
Those are some really interesting and maybe even a little radical ideas, but I can see how they could lead to AI that's more aligned with human values.
It's not just about the evaluation methods themselves, it's also about who's doing the evaluating.
So we're back to the who question, but with a different perspective.
Right. If we're embracing this idea of AI as a partner, we need to involve a much more diverse group of people in the evaluation process.
People who can bring a wider range of perspectives and expertise to the table.
People who can help us see the potential of AI, not just the risks.
So artists, philosophers, spiritual leaders, everyday citizens, everyone has a role to play.
Exactly. And we need to create spaces where those diverse voices can be heard and valued.
Spaces for open and honest conversations about the future of AI, where we can work together to create a path that benefits everyone.
That's a vision worth striving for.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've explored so many fascinating ideas, and I think we've all come away with a lot to think about.
I agree. And as AI continues to evolve, these conversations are only going to become more important.
But one thing is for sure. The future of AI is not something that just happens to us. It's something we create together. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring the amazing world of AI.